Hey Internet, welcome back. So in this video we wanted to complete the third of three recent thoughts that we had around sort of how LTC learning to code is similar to sports, fitness, physical activities, stuff like that. More specifically, we wanted to discuss the idea of sort of how I think about LTC learning to code, the variety of things that you can learn, whether it be programming languages, subject areas, whether you can focus on practical things versus more theory. I think there's some really interesting parallels with specific sports, and so we wanted to delve into that. All right, so let's get started. So, as I sort of began the process of LTC Learn to Code, as I mentioned before in earlier videos, I think the first thing I tried was like Codecademy in 2014, 2015, so 4 years ago. Imagine if I had gone headstrong, all in 4 years ago, where I could be. But I didn't. And so now, to make myself feel better, I sort of imagine how 4 years from now, your old self, however you want to say that, will thank me for starting today rather than in 4 years from today. All right, so the first thing I tried was Codecademy, which at the time was okay. It didn't really gel with me. Then after a while, I discovered Udemy, and at some point I tried to take a Python class on Udemy, and that was okay. And then I was like, oh, okay, it's probably just, it's not Python that I want to do, it's web scraping. So I used a web framework called Scrapy, again, through Udemy. Then I took some MOOCs, and again, it's just like nothing really stuck. Fast forward, when I decided to leave my role in consulting and like sort of go into code full time, or LTC learning to code full time, there was this like choice that felt like a big choice, felt like an important choice, felt like a life-altering choice, and in some ways it probably was, right? But it was like, okay, now that you're going to LTC learn to code, where do you start? Like, how are you going to approach it? What language are you going to do? What type of program? Are you going to do a boot camp? No boot camp? Are you going to self-study? No self-study? Are you going to go back to school? Sort of what manner might you wish to approach learning to code? And I was like pretty stressed out because I didn't want to make a suboptimal answer, right? This is, I guess, probably pretty common, but like very few of us want to intentionally or unintentionally screw our future selves in picking some less than ideal choice. And this can sort of lead to analysis paralysis. There's a cool TED Talk video, which I will try to link in, about analysis paralysis. I was trying to think of the dude's name, Schwartz. Don't remember the name or the book. He's a professor, and I'm totally blanking. So he's a professor at blank institution, and he talks about the paradox of choice. Sometimes that, like, when you have too many choices, your brain shuts down, and you end up choosing nothing. And he uses the example of jams. And I'm, having memory jam of what his name is. I think it's like Bill Schwartz, Bob Schwartz, something Schwartz. Probably none of those, so I'll just stop trying to stall while I think of his name. In any case, I like how this sort of these moments of analysis paralysis, and I would just like go weeks without necessarily making much progress in like what language to choose. Eventually, I decided to study JavaScript for a month or two, and that was fun. And then I enrolled in this bootcamp in France, which is like full stack with Ruby backend. Full stack meaning it focuses on both front and back end. So whatever that means. Sorry, that was because I have strong opinions about coding bootcamps and how they don't really, they're not for everyone, but they can be like specific value for specific people or target people. Like, I'm getting a lot of value, and mostly it's just like I have a lot of value having an external environment with other people who like want to learn to code. It's like cool being in the whole space. It's cool having a structured program where I don't have to like make all of these decisions about like what I should study, what I shouldn't study. It's just like sort of like we were talking about earlier, I think, in like outsourcing some of the decisions to society or group. I like it to do that. Like, I just get to trust in their system, and whether it's flawed or ideal, like I don't have to think about it too much. partly just because I think like the process of LTC, learning to code, is, if you're lucky, a longer process, right? Potentially a lifelong process. But if you think about it in terms of like career steps, it's like not something that you're gonna, just finish in 3 months or something. So in any case, like I started like going down this process of learning to code. I moved from JavaScript to this like more full stack structured program, and recently I've just been thinking about how like learning to code and sort of the debate about what language you should use, what language you should start with, like all of these different things that I think there's like a lot of heated discussion on the internet. And in some ways that's good, right? But like I think it's sort of irrelevant, like personally. Like I think learning to code and which language you should do is sort of like the discussion that people would ask and pose. It's sort of the question and the discussion that followed that people would sort of pose or get into when I was working at Whole Foods. Because I worked at Whole Foods for a year between high school and college, to show my roots. It's a super long story. Basically, I wanted to go to school in Texas and run competitively for University of Texas, and I thought that was the best way, by working for a year in Texas. So I started working at Whole Foods. I also worked on a movie set. That was pretty cool. Again, different story. But there was like this debate in the whole community of like, should you use paper or plastic, right? And this is like when it was still a choice. Now a lot of institutions or grocery stores, like either they don't have plastic bags or cities have imposed an ordinance on all bags, whether it be paper or plastic. So it's like a little bit different of a question than it used to be, but I like find it to be an interesting one. But sort of the philosophy that I started adopting was like, whatever bag you should use or whatever bag you should sort of select, whether it be paper or plastic or no bag, is like the bag that you're going to reuse, right? So ideally you would bring your own bag. And if you forget a bag, maybe you like just like carry out your groceries on your own. But if you want a bag from Whole Foods or from some other institution, it's like, well, what bag are you going to reuse, right? Because if you think about the saying, which people have strong political views about, whether or not it's correct, I'd no comment, but like reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So if you apply that to what type of bag you should use, it's like, well, which type of bag would you use less frequently, reduce? Which kind of bag would you reuse? Would you more often reuse paper or plastic bags? And then if you're not going to reuse them, or once you're done reusing them, which are you more likely to recycle, right? So like, are plastic bags worse than paper bags? Well, if they're both going to go to the landfill, maybe not. But like, if you're going to reuse a plastic bag several times and you're not going to reuse a paper bag at all, then maybe it's better to get a plastic bag. Anyway, so it's hard to say whether or not there's a sort of a quantifiably right or wrong answer here for what type of bag you want to use. But I think it's like, can be ported over quite interestingly to learning to code. Like whether you should start with JavaScript, Ruby, C, C++, Python, whatever. It's sort of like, what language are you most likely to latch onto? Which language are you most likely to use, whether in your career or like within your pursuit? And so like, if you're never going to use JavaScript because you don't give it care, I was going to use a bad word. If you don't give a care about like front-end web development and you don't want to use Node for backend and all this kind of stuff, then maybe don't use JavaScript, right? Like if you're like really interested in game development, maybe you should like learn something like just so that you can use Unity or whatever. And like if you want to make mobile apps for the Western audience, like iOS could be a pretty interesting market. If you like want to use and create mobile apps for say Southeast Asia, like maybe iOS isn't the first, or like Swift isn't the first language you should learn, whatever. So anyway, I think there's like a variety of interesting questions that can be posed or you can consider around like, what is the best language to learn when first learning to code, LTC? What sort of are the advantages or disadvantages of other languages? And like, there's sort of this infinite amount of questions that you can ask, but it's like, I think it's almost missing the point. My point is the following. Coming back to sports, now that we've been gone for a fair amount of time, I think it's interesting thinking about sports in that like, not everyone is going to be an athlete in life, right? So does that mean everyone should everyone still have to be exposed to sports? Like, is physical education in the United States like an important thing? Yes or no? Maybe, right? But like, Is everyone going to be good at sports? No. Is everyone going to be good at code? No. Should people still learn to code, and should people still be exposed to like physical exercise and sports? Maybe, right? That's like one level of debate. The second debate is like, you know, when I was growing up, I did I did physical therapy, which is separate, but I also did PE. And at some point, I like started playing soccer or football, right? Non-American football, meaning soccer. I'll just call it soccer, right? Because I'm from the United States. That's generally what we call it. So I started playing soccer, and then my mom was like, "Well, all of my little friends at the time, I was like 6 or 7, are starting to play t-ball." So my mom signed me up for t-ball. Maybe my dad signed me up for t-ball. Someone signed me up for t-ball. I tried t-ball. I was pretty awful at t-ball. Then it was Little League. So like, you know, the difference between sort of Little League and t-ball, at least when I was growing up, or at least the way I remember it when I was growing up, which there's several levels of abstraction here. T-ball, like, you have a ball, it sits on a tee, you hit the ball. Little League, someone actually throws a pitch, or a machine throws a pitch, and it's much harder. And I was like pretty bad at t-ball, and I was like awful at Little League. So I just stopped doing Little League, and I think that's fine. Bring that over to code, like, you know, maybe it's like Ruby. Ruby is like t-ball. It's like a language that's like a little easy, and then you get into the MVC model with like Ruby on Rails, and then it's like Little League or something, and like maybe it just like doesn't work for you. So then you come over here, your parents, someone is like, I want to try basketball. So you try basketball. Like, you should be relatively good at basketball because, you know, you're an adolescent, you're quite tall, you're male, you're me. You're actually not me, so you'll have to like use your imagination to imagine a very awkward, highly acne eyes to like someone with a lot of acne, generally sort of geeky version of me, but you know, much younger, and definitely afraid to talk to girls. So yeah, anyway, just had some thoughts. But anyway, like, I should be good at basketball. I'm like much taller than most people in my class. I should be but I was just like, I wasn't great at basketball. I didn't enjoy it. So then I like went over to another sport. Again, like every summer I would play soccer, and I really enjoyed soccer. But I tried Little League, tried t-ball, tried basketball. Never played football, but eventually like I got into running. And running competitively, being cross country and track. And that was my passion. That was my passion in high school. That was sort of how I thought about going to college. I guess I was like sort of on a default path to go to college. No one ever told me I should question whether or not to go to college. Don't know if that's good or bad, but like whatever. We'll just presume that I would at least apply to college, if not go, which I did. And I sort of just the analogy is like, I am no longer a student athlete. I'm no longer really an athlete. But like athletics and fitness is like part of my life, right? And it's not going to be part of everyone's life. And so if we come back over to code, it's like there's a question of whether or not everyone or a number of people should be exposed to code or given the opportunity to code. And I like generally believe that like anyone who wants to learn to code should be given that opportunity, right? And you can create sort of systems and organizations and incentives to like make that more rather than less likely. That's just my opinion. But then, like, is everyone going to be good at code or be good at LTC, learning to code, or good at programming? No. Does that mean that they shouldn't try? No. Then there's sort of like the analogy of what we've been talking about, and like you try different sports, you try different physical activities. Some of them stick, some of them don't, and that's fine. Same over here. You try different programming languages, you try different frameworks, you try different things. Like, that's fine. Like, then you can sort of go into the theory of like, should everyone know the theory of baseball? Should everyone know the history of baseball? Should everyone know the blah blah blah? The answer is probably not. Like, should everyone know the history of like early development of programming languages like Cobalt and all of these different things? Like, probably not. But you know, there's some subset of people that will benefit from that. And so there's just like all these interesting choices, I think, within the space of LTC learning to code. And like, then you could even go with the example of like within sports, like, is everyone going to be a professional athlete? No. Are most people going to be a professional athlete? No. Like, are most people going to be professional coders? No. Are some people going to be fast growers? Yes. I don't know why I'm using that sort of tone. It seemed natural. I mean, maybe it was unnatural, but it seemed like something to do. So, in any case, I think just like within the realm of LTC learning to code, there are some interesting analogies within sports or physical activity. In summary, we talked about some of them. We talked about sort of trying out different sports, some of them sticking, some of them not. Same with code. We talked about how, there's some interesting questions about whether or not everyone should be forced or encouraged to be exposed to physical education and or physical therapy, and whether or not there's social value. That's a separate question. And we just sort of talked a little bit about how you might try a lot of things. Some of them may stick, some of them may not. None of them may stick, and I think personally that's fine. All right, so we are wrapping things up. We'd love to know what you think. We'd love to know what you think about this topic, about sort of learning to code sort of broadly, but learning to code and any potential analogies with sports or fitness. Or, if you're so interested and so inclined, are there sort of other areas apart from sports and fitness where you personally see a number of analogies or parallels, I guess is probably a better way to put it. If so, what is that area? What are those areas, and sort of what are the parallels that you might draw? As always, thank you for watching. We look forward to your feedback if you so choose to give it, and hopefully we'll catch you again soon. All right, bye.